Have you ever seen someone who had everything, success, respect, power, and influence, only to lose it because they became proud? The story of King Uzziah is one of the most powerful and emotional stories in the Bible. It is the story of a young king who started well, honored God, achieved incredible success, and became one of the greatest rulers Judah had ever known. But it is also the story of how pride can quietly grow in a person's heart and destroy what took years to build. Long ago, in the kingdom of Judah, a young boy named Uzziah faced a responsibility far greater than most people could imagine. His father, King Amaziah, had died, and the people needed a new ruler. Uzziah was only 16 years old. Think about that for a moment. Most teenagers are still learning about life, but Uzziah was suddenly responsible for leading an entire nation. The future of Judah rested on his shoulders. Many people probably wondered whether he was ready. Could someone so young govern a kingdom? Could he make wise decisions? Could he protect the nation from its enemies? Yet from the very beginning, Uzziah showed signs of wisdom. The Bible tells us that he sought God and followed godly guidance during his early years as king. Instead of relying only on his own understanding, he looked to God for direction. And because of that, something remarkable happened. God blessed him. Year after year, Uzziah's kingdom grew stronger. The young king proved to be intelligent, hardworking, and determined. He rebuilt cities that had been destroyed. He strengthened the walls around Jerusalem. He improved the nation's defenses and prepared the army to protect the people. Under his leadership, Judah began to flourish. The economy improved. Farms produced abundant crops. Vineyards spread across the land. Shepherds cared for large flocks of animals. Uzziah loved agriculture and invested in the land. The fields became productive, and the nation prospered. As the years passed, his fame spread far beyond Judah. Neighboring nations heard about his success. His army became one of the strongest in the region. Thousands of trained soldiers stood ready to defend the kingdom. Uzziah even encouraged the development of advanced military equipment designed to protect Jerusalem from attack. Everything seemed to be going right. The people admired him. His enemies respected him. His kingdom grew wealthy. His influence expanded. And his name became famous throughout the land. If someone had looked at Uzziah's life during those years, they might have said, "This king has everything." But success often carries a hidden danger. Success can make people believe they no longer need help. Success can make people forget where their blessings came from. Success can slowly turn gratitude into pride. And that is exactly what happened to Uzziah. At first, the change was probably small. Pride rarely appears overnight. It grows quietly. One success leads to another. One victory follows the next. People praise you. People admire you. People tell you how great you are. Eventually, if you're not careful, you begin believing that you are responsible for everything. You begin thinking the rules don't apply to you. You begin forgetting that your success came from God. Somewhere along the way, Uzziah's heart changed. The king who once depended on God began depending on himself. The humble young ruler became proud. And pride would lead him toward the greatest mistake of his life. One day, Uzziah entered the temple of the Lord. Now, to understand why this moment was so important, we need to remember something. In ancient Israel, God had given specific responsibilities to different people. The king had his role. The priests had their role. The priests were chosen to perform sacred duties inside the temple, including burning incense before God. This was not a task for kings. It was not a task for politicians. It was not a task for military leaders. It belonged only to the priests. Yet Uzziah decided that he would perform this sacred act himself. Perhaps he believed that his power gave him the right. Perhaps he thought his success placed him above the law. Whatever the reason, he walked into the temple carrying a censer filled with incense. At that moment, the high priest and 80 courageous priests followed him. Imagine the scene. There stood one of the most powerful men in the nation. A king whose commands could move armies. A king respected throughout the region. And standing before him were priests willing to risk everything to speak the truth. The high priest confronted him. He said, "King Uzziah, this is not your responsibility. God has given this duty to the priests. You must leave." The king had a choice. He could listen. He could humble himself. He could admit his mistake. He could walk away. Nobody would remember the incident for long. But pride makes it difficult to accept correction. Especially when the correction comes from someone with less worldly power. Instead of listening, Uzziah became furious. The priests had challenged him. The king who was used to giving orders was now being told no. And he did not like it. As he stood there in anger, holding the censer in his hand, something terrifying happened. Suddenly, leprosy appeared on his forehead. Instantly. Without warning. The priests saw it. The king saw it. Everyone in the temple understood what had happened. God had judged his disobedience. The powerful king who thought he could do whatever he wanted suddenly realized he was not above God's authority. His pride had brought him to this moment. The Bible says Uzziah hurried to leave the temple. The man who had entered confidently now rushed out in fear. Everything changed in a single moment. Leprosy was a devastating condition in those days. It affected not only a person's health but also their place in society. As long as Uzziah lived with leprosy, his life would never be the same. He could no longer function as king in the way he once had. He lived separately from others. His son took over many of the responsibilities of governing the kingdom. The king who had once stood before armies now lived in isolation. The ruler who had been admired throughout the land now carried the consequences of his pride. Can you imagine how much time he had to think? Day after day. Month after month. Year after year. He had plenty of opportunities to reflect on what had happened. Perhaps he remembered his younger days. Perhaps he remembered the times when he prayed sincerely. Perhaps he remembered when he depended on God instead of himself. Perhaps he wondered how things could have been different if he had listened to the priests. The sad reality is that one moment of pride changed the course of his life. What makes Uzziah's story so emotional is that he was not a wicked king for most of his life. He was not known for cruelty. He was not remembered as a terrible ruler. In fact, he accomplished many great things. That is what makes his downfall so tragic. He started so well. He had so much potential. He experienced God's blessing. Yet he allowed pride to damage his legacy. Many people fail because of weakness. Uzziah failed because of strength. His success became his greatest test. And that lesson is still relevant today. Most people think failure is the biggest danger in life. But sometimes success is even more dangerous. When life is difficult, people often pray more. When life is difficult, people seek advice. When life is difficult, people depend on God. But when everything is going well, it becomes easy to forget those habits. It becomes easy to believe we don't need help. It becomes easy to ignore correction. It becomes easy to think we know best. That is why the story of Uzziah continues to speak to people thousands of years later. His story reminds us that character matters more than achievements. Humility matters more than fame. Obedience matters more than power. No matter how successful we become, we must never believe we are above accountability. We all need people who can speak truth into our lives. We all need the humility to admit when we are wrong. We all need to remember where our blessings come from. Years later, the prophet Isaiah would mention the year King Uzziah died. His death marked the end of a long and significant reign. Many people remembered his accomplishments. Many remembered the strength he brought to Judah. But they also remembered the lesson his life taught. A lesson about pride. A lesson about humility. A lesson about finishing well. The story of Uzziah reminds us that a good beginning is important, but it is not enough. What matters is remaining faithful all the way to the end. Success can build a great reputation, but humility protects it. Power can open many doors, but character determines what happens when we walk through them. As we reflect on Uzziah's life, we are left with a simple but powerful question. When success comes, will we become proud, or will we remain humble? Because the higher we rise, the more important it becomes to remember the one who lifted us there. And that may be the greatest lesson King Uzziah leaves behind. His story is not just about a king who fell. It is about every one of us. It is a reminder to stay humble, stay teachable, and stay close to God, no matter how successful life becomes. For in the end, it is not how high we climb that matters most. It is how faithfully we walk with God along the way.